So good morning. Diving in, that's what I'm speaking about today. The Spirit within me is God. The living Spirit Almighty is within me now. Spirit is the sustaining principle of my life. I open my mind to its influx. I open my consciousness to its inflowing. I open my heart to its love. It's from This Thing Called You by Ernest Holmes. The Spirit within you is God. The living Spirit Almighty is within you now. Spirit is the sustaining principle of your life. So today, this month, will you open your mind wider than ever before to its influx, your consciousness to its inflowing, and your heart to its love? That's the question, will you? Yes. Okay. I'm glad you said yes, because that is exactly what we're here to experience this month, and we're going to do that this entire month. Truly within every one of us, there is a call, a deep longing, a soul's yearning to connect with, commune with, and be in conscious union with a power greater than ourselves, which we call God, or Spirit, or Universal Mind. It is a longing to be home. I know that's how I felt the first time I went to a religious science center. I felt like I was home, and I didn't know that I'd been longing for that. There's an innate yearning at the depth of our being to connect with, commune with, live from this higher presence and power. And whether or not we dive in and answer the call will determine the level of contentment, peace, and plenty that we experience in our lives. But we do want to dive in, don't we? And that's why we're here today, and we're just going to do that. I want to begin, however, with the recognition that sometimes this world of form that we live in, can so grab our attention, can become so all-consuming, can become so real that it seems to leave little, if any, space for anything more than just coping or dealing with it. I know I kind of felt that way when all I could do was care for this little dog that really couldn't use her back legs very well. She had to be in her kennel, and it was all-consuming. And as she gets better, it's like, okay, life kind of comes back. That ebb and flow. And let alone really making the connection that our souls long for. To illustrate, here's a story in the Hindu tradition about a yogi whose guru left him under a tree on a riverbank to meditate on God. The yogi had two possessions, his loincloth and his begging bowl. That's it, nothing more. One day, he would walk to the village to beg for food. The rest of the time he spent in contemplation of God. One night he washed out his loincloth and hung it on the tree to dry. When he awakened the next morning, it had been chewed by a rat. With great embarrassment, that day he had to beg for both food and a new loincloth. And then he went right back on his schedule of contemplating God. A few days later, he washed out his new loincloth and hung it up to dry, and once again, that rat chewed it up during the night. What was the yogi to do? It was unseemly for a man of God to keep begging for loincloths. So he got a kitten to chase the rat. But the kitten was hungry, so the yogi had to beg for milk. Well, it was embarrassing to beg for milk, so he found a stray cow. All went well until the summer heat burned off the grasses, and the yogi had to beg for fodder for the cow. It wasn't good to have to beg for fodder, so when the rainy season came, the yogi planted some crops. The crops prospered in the rich soil, but so much of his time was spent farming that he could barely have time to meditate. So he hired laborers to tend to the fields, but they needed supervision, which disturbed his meditations. To oversee the workers so that he could go back to God, the yogi decided to take a wife. But she didn't want to live under a tree by a river, so he built her a house. And it needed to be a large house, for she was soon pregnant. The yogi grew fat and wealthy by the banks of the river. One day, when he was sitting under his meditation tree resting, a familiar figure approached. It was his guru, who surveyed the scene with a wide-eyed look and said, Student, is that you? Did I not leave you under this tree 5 years ago to contemplate God with nothing but a begging bowl and loincloth? The yogi bowed his head, gestured to his vast estate, and said, Reverend teacher, I know it seems hard to understand, but truly, this was the only way I could keep my loincloth. Can anyone relate to that? I mean, where one thing just leads to the next, and pretty soon what you were originally set out to do is, wait, why was I here in the first place? It can be so easy to get distracted from our relationship with God, with the things that the world is calling our attention to, can't it? We get distracted so easily. But if we desire to experience true peace and true prosperity, if we desire a deep contentment, satisfaction, and happiness in life, if we desire to fill the space of longing in our hearts, we must find and nurture our connection to Source. Or to phrase it consistent with our month's theme, we must move into the ways of the mystic. We must move into the ways of the mystic. Okay, does that make anyone have qualms or feel a little uncomfortable? And we're a pretty advanced group here. Makes you feel happy. Okay. Well, I know that I have a lot of friends that if I said, I'm moving into the ways of the mystic, they would like, whoa, what are you talking about? That seems so odd. And they would say, I can't move into the way of a mystic. I'm no mystic. And, they might say, yes, I want to fill that longing, but saying I must go the way of the mystic, well, that leaves me out, because mystics are saints, right? Exalted ones, holy men and women, sages and gurus who sit on top of the mountain, meditating 24/7 and knowing the meaning of life. That can't be me. I'm too busy. I've got all these other things to do. But that is a misconception. Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind does a beautiful job of describing the mystic. He says a mystic is not a mysterious person, but is one who has a deep inner sense of life and of his unity with the whole. A mystic is one who intuitively perceives the truth and without mental process, meaning without having to think about it, arrives at spiritual realization. The mystic senses the atmosphere of God. I love that. The atmosphere of God. The mystic sense reveals the greater truth and knows that infinite as is the divine being, it is still personal to all who believe in its presence. So as infinite as is the divine being, it is still personal to each and every one of us who believe in its presence. Neville, in his book, Your Faith is Your Fortune, wrote, consciously claim yourself to be that which you seek. Consciously claim yourself to be that which you seek. Appropriate the consciousness of that which you see, and you too will know the status of true mystic. Isn't that what we're doing when we say the Spirit within me is God? The living Spirit Almighty is within me now. Spirit is the sustaining principle of my life. I open my mind to its influx. I open my consciousness to its inflowing. I open my heart to its love. Rabbi David Cooper, in his book God is a Verb, wrote that whenever he sat down with holy men and women, whether they were Buddhist monks or Native American shamans or Catholic priests, they all shared their mystical insights and experiences. They were all saying the same thing. Different words, yes, different focus for different times, different cultures, different people, yes, but still they were the same. And the message, the deep message that each one of these teachers spoke about was really quite simple, and it's not complicated. It is that we each have something profound within us, and that all we must do is awaken to it. It's all we must do. It's already within us. We must awaken to it, become present to it, come alive to it. As Dr. J. Scott Neal says, and this is my favorite quote of his, your dreams are waiting for you to come true. That's what we're here to do. In roughly 500 BCE, there was a man named Siddhartha Gautama who was walking this earth and doing holy work. He was astounding people with his mere presence, so they asked, not who are you, but what are you? Are you an angel, they asked. No, he said. Are you a god then? They asked. No, he replied. I am simply one who is awake. And he became known as the awakened one, which is what Buddha means. We each have something profound within us, and we all must do what it takes to awaken it, to become present to it, to come alive to it. It really is that simple. All we have to do is do that. But we try to make it complicated, don't we? Ernest Holmes recognized this when he said in the Science of Mind textbook that we regularly try to make a riddle out of simplicity. To illustrate how complicated we sometimes try to make things that are very simple, I want to tell you another story from another Holmes, but not Ernest this time. Sherlock. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson went on a camping trip. As they lay down for the night, Holmes said, Watson, look up into the sky and tell me what you see. Watson said, I see millions and millions of stars. And what does that tell you? Holmes asked. Astronomically, Watson replied, it tells me that there are millions of galaxies and potentially billions of planets. Theologically, it tells me that God and his universe are infinite. Meteorologically, it tells me that we will have a beautiful day tomorrow. Feeling rather self-satisfied that he'd come up with all of these angles so quickly and cleverly, he turned to Holmes and said, so what does it tell you? Well, it tells me somebody stole our tent. We try to make it complicated, but it really is that simple. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? You are spirit. You are the activity of God expressing as you. Every experience in life is an opportunity to take the steps that lead toward the fulfillment of your glorious potential. Essentially, mysticism recognizes that God is in all, and it is the practice of seeing, sensing, feeling, and experiencing God within and without. It is the practice of letting God guide and direct and inspire. We call this our intuition. Dr. Holmes in The Science of Mind writes, the highest mental practice is to listen to this inner voice and to declare its presence. The greater a man's consciousness of this indwelling I am, the more fully he will live. This will never lead to illusion, but will always lead to reality. All great souls have known this and have constantly striven to let the mind of God express through their mentalities. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. This was the declaration of the great master, and it should be ours also. Not a limited sense of life, but a limitless one. Listening to that small inner voice. We've all experienced that, haven't we? Can anyone think of something where they listened to that voice and you got that message to do something? I know just for myself that we've been planning a trip that we've known about for quite a while, and things just haven't been falling into place. And we haven't known, we haven't bought our tickets yet because we just weren't sure. We went and saw a travel agent, but that didn't feel right. And we got online and we started plotting out. We were going to fly here and fly from there to here and everything. And somebody said, why don't you rent a car? And that crossing state lines and returning them to other places are so much more expensive. So as we waited to get more information on everything, and people shared information with us, someone said, why don't you rent a car, fly into one place, rent a car, do your driving, come back to that place, thereby returning the car, saving all that money. I mean, everything fell into place. So that's what we're pursuing now. Now it feels right. Listening and waiting instead of jumping and just doing it at the beginning. So it was kind of an interesting thing because I have been listening to what my inner voice has been saying. So it's like, let's wait. Okay, now it's time. So I don't know if anybody else has something like that they...
Like the old saying, let go, let God.
Mm-hmm.
He'll tell you the right way.
Exactly, and it all falls into place. We are all natural mystics. When we get out of our heads and into our hearts, we can be drawn to deeper levels. The Buddha said, let your mind become clear like a still forest pond. I want to use the metaphor of a still forest pond to take us this morning to that mystical place, if you'd like to go with me. So close your eyes if you choose, and relax into your seat. Take a few deep breaths. In our forest pond, there are 5 levels, and you are going to be slowly dropping a pebble down into the pond and watch it descend the 5 levels. Level 1, the surface. On the surface of the pond, it is not very still. On the surface, there are all sorts of disturbances. The water is churned up by the wind, pelted by the rain, frozen by cold temperatures, thawed by warm temperatures. Leaves and dirt litter the surface. All the disturbances of the pond are visible at this level. The surface of your mind is also where all the activity, all the disturbances exist. We call this level the chatter level. At this level, 60,000 thoughts per day breeze across your mind. This chatter is about finances, deadlines, health, children, appointments, shopping lists, retirement, vacation choices, world unrest, the shutting down of our government, conflict at work, relationships, and last night's dinner. The thoughts are endless. And of course, this is where the ego lives with all of its hurts and upsets and judgments. But you know, just because the surface is being whipped around with mad activity, it doesn't mean that all the activity is going on below the surface. Some surface litter does not make the pond impure. So let your rock drop down just below the surface. This is level 2. And just below the surface, the disturbances have very little impact. The storm may still be above, but its presence is not felt in the same way here as it was when you were right in the middle of it. Likewise, when you go below the surface of your mind, you leave the egoic chatter behind. Here, the constant entering and exiting of thoughts is replaced with a different kind of thinking. You have more control of the thinking process, though you are still a long way from the silence of the deep. But here, your thinking is more focused. As you sit still, you may find that your thoughts are now on analyzing. Those silent comments you make as you assess your progress or lack of it, others' progress or lack of it, and even as you proceed with this meditative process. But just go back to your pebble and see it falling through the 2nd level, leaving your analyzing mind behind. So now we go to level 3, well below the surface. The pebble is now well below the surface of your mind. Feel the chatter lessening, as well as the need to analyze everything. Allow your mind to see the flow of how things are all connected and held together. At this level, begin to experience more of your spiritual nature. At this level, at this quiet level, deep below the surface, accept that people are unique and that you may not understand how and why everyone behaves the way they do, including yourself. But here there is no need to analyze. It's much more rewarding than just surrender to the flow. Feel the flow of acceptance followed by gratitude. And as you surrender to the flow, the pebble drops even deeper. Level 4, stillness. You are now getting to the place where you are actually experiencing the shutting down, the dialogue. In this space, thoughts begin to disappear as you sink into pure awareness. Notice the silence of awareness as fewer thoughts swim in. As your mind becomes quieter, you might begin to notice joy beginning to sparkle. As the great mystic Teilhard de Chardin once said, joy is the infallible sign of the presence of God. At the fourth level below the surface of your mind, began experiencing joy. Began to experience the presence of God. And yet there's still one more level to which our pebble is going to drop. Level 5, the field of all possibilities. This is the final resting place for our pebble. This place is beyond mere quieting of the mind. Here is the place within where you empty your mind of all thoughts and experience the stillness. This place is very hard to describe in words. Here, rather than focusing on any thought, put your awareness, your inner awareness, on the space that exists between the thoughts. It is the field of all possibilities. There are no distractions here, no separation, only consciousness. Pure consciousness merged into one. Ernest Holmes wrote, all of the great mystics have agreed that the soul is on the pathway of experience, that is, of self-discovery, that it is on its way back to its Father's house, and that every soul will ultimately reach its heavenly home. Here, you are home. When you're ready, come back. Welcome. And so it is.